Emma had always been careful with her heart. She grew up watching people fall in love too fast and break too easily. So when she met Daniel, she wasn't expecting anything. It was one of those gray Seattle evenings when the air smelled like rain and the city. Lights looked like melting gold on wet streets. She had gone to an art exhibit alone, something she often did when she needed quiet. That's where she first saw him standing a few feet away, studying the same painting she was. The painting showed a wide, empty field under a soft gray sky. Emma had been lost in it, thinking it looked peaceful but lonely. Then a voice beside her said gently, "It feels like someone's waiting there." She turned and saw Daniel, tall, calm, with eyes that carried a quiet kind of warmth. It wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it, like he truly saw the world and not just looked at it. They talked for hours that night. About art, about life, about how silence sometimes said more than words. When the gallery lights dimmed, they walked outside together, sharing an umbrella as the rain began to fall harder. It wasn't planned. It wasn't a grand moment. It was simple, and somehow that simplicity felt right. Over the next few weeks, they kept meeting. Coffee on weekends. Walks by Lake Union in the cool evening air. They didn't rush into love. It grew slowly, naturally, like the seasons changing. Emma liked that Daniel wasn't the kind of man who filled every silence. He listened, really listened. When she spoke about her dreams, her fears, or the family she barely talked to, he never interrupted. He just let her be heard. That was rare. A year passed before she realized how much she had let him in. She had given him the quiet parts of her heart, the ones she usually kept locked away. He had become her safe place in a world that often felt uncertain. Together, they built a small life filled with gentle habits. Every morning, Daniel would make her coffee, always adding just the right amount of cream. Every evening, they'd sit on the porch watching the sun fade behind the water. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was peace. Sometimes peace can make you believe it will last forever. One night, after Daniel had gone to bed, Emma stayed up late answering a few work emails. That's when it happened. Her laptop pinged a new message. It wasn't for her. It was clearly meant for Daniel. The subject line made her pause. "We need to talk about what happened last month." The sender's name was Rachel. Emma stared at the screen. The room suddenly felt colder. She didn't want to open it. She told herself it was probably nothing, a work matter, maybe a client. But something inside her whispered otherwise. She hesitated, her heart pounding harder than it should. Finally, curiosity won. She clicked. The words inside weren't romantic. They weren't dramatic either. They were confusing. The message spoke of a mistake, of keeping something quiet, and ended with a line that made her stomach twist. "You have to tell her, Daniel. She deserves to know." Emma sat back, the glow of the screen lighting her worried face. Tell who? Know what? She reread the email several times, but it didn't make sense. The tone wasn't angry, but heavy, like someone carrying guilt. When Daniel came home the next day, everything looked the same smile, the same soft "Hey, I missed you." But Emma's world didn't feel the same anymore. She smiled back, trying to keep her voice steady, but her mind was restless. She studied his face, his tone, his movements, searching for something, a clue, a crack. Anything that would tell her the truth behind that email. That evening, he cooked dinner for her, pasta, their favorite, and told her about his trip, how the hotel coffee was awful, how the rain had followed him even out of Seattle. She laughed, trying to sound normal, but the words "we need to talk about what happened" kept echoing in her mind. When he reached over to take her hand, she almost pulled away. Almost. But instead, she smiled again, hiding her confusion behind warmth. She told herself she'd ask him later, maybe tomorrow, maybe when the timing was better. But when he said goodnight and kissed her forehead, something inside her cracked. That night, sleep didn't come easily. She lay beside him, listening to his breathing, thinking of all the stories he had ever told her about his work, his friends, his family. There was nothing strange about any of it. He had always seemed open, honest. So what could he possibly be hiding? At 2 in the morning, she quietly sat up and looked at him, sleeping beside her, peaceful, unbothered, unaware of the storm building in her chest. She didn't want to invade his privacy, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. She needed to know. She reached for his phone on the nightstand, her fingers trembling. She hesitated again, whispering to herself just one look. Her heart beat faster as the screen lit up. She searched for the name Rachel. There it was. Only a few messages. Nothing romantic. No signs of betrayal. But still the tone was serious. They spoke of the past, of what was left unfinished. And one message from Daniel read, "I promised I wouldn't tell her." You know why? Emma froze. Promised who? Tell what? She put the phone down carefully, as if it were something fragile. Her thoughts were spinning, filling in blanks that didn't exist. For the first time since meeting Daniel, she didn't feel safe in her certainty. She wasn't angry. Not yet. Just scared. Scared of what she didn't understand. When morning came, Daniel woke up cheerful, humming softly as he made coffee. He kissed her cheek and asked, "Did you sleep well?" She nodded, forcing a small smile. She wanted to ask right then, to show him the messages, to say, "I know something." But her voice stayed quiet. She wasn't ready. She needed to think. All day at work, her mind drifted back to that email. Every sound, every word Daniel had ever said. Replayed in her head like pieces of a puzzle that suddenly didn't fit together anymore. By the time she got home, the tension had turned into silence between them. Not angry silence, just distance. Emma didn't know yet that the truth waiting ahead wasn't about betrayal or lies of love. It was something heavier, something Daniel had carried for years, hidden, not out of guilt, but out of pain. But in that moment, all she could feel was confusion. She trusted him with her whole heart, and for the first time, that trust felt uncertain. She didn't know that the discovery she was about to make would not only change their love, it would also break Daniel in a way she never expected. And that night, as rain began to fall softly against their window again, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something in their peaceful little world had just quietly begun to crack. Emma couldn't stop thinking about the email. It followed her everywhere, in the shower, on her way to work, even when she tried to sleep. The words "you have to tell her," Daniel replayed in her mind again and again. She didn't know what it meant, but it had changed how she looked at him. Every word he said now carried a quiet question behind it. Every smile made her wonder what he was hiding. She tried to ignore it, tried to tell herself it was nothing serious. Maybe Rachel was just a friend from his past, someone dealing with an old issue. But then she remembered his message. "I promised I wouldn't tell her." Her stomach tightened every time she thought about it. What kind of promise was worth keeping a secret from the person you loved? Days passed, but the tension grew heavier. Daniel noticed her distance, though she tried to act normal. "You seem quiet lately," he said one evening as they sat by the lake. The sunset painted everything gold, but Emma barely saw it. "Just tired," she replied softly, forcing a smile. He nodded, not pressing her further, his hand gently resting on hers. His warmth should have comforted her, but it didn't. It only made her feel guilty for doubting him, that night. When Daniel left for a business dinner, Emma sat alone at their kitchen table. The quiet felt louder than usual. She stared at his phone on the counter. She had promised herself she wouldn't look again, but the truth had already opened its door. Slowly she picked it up, her hands cold. There were more messages this time. Short ones. Mostly from Rachel. One said he would have wanted her to know. "Daniel." Another read, "You can't hide it forever." Emma felt her heart race. He? Who was he? And what was Daniel hiding for so long? Just then she heard the front door open. Daniel's voice called out, "Hey, I'm back." Startled, she quickly locked the phone and placed it on the counter. He walked in, smiling, holding takeout boxes. "I thought we could eat together," he said. She smiled back, trying to sound calm. But her voice shook slightly as she said, "That's nice of you." They ate in silence. Daniel talked about work, about a project that had finally been approved. Emma nodded at the right moments, but her mind wasn't there. She was thinking about Rachel. about the name that had entered their peaceful life and refused to leave. Later that night, when Daniel went to shower, Emma sat on the couch, feeling torn. She didn't want to confront him with anger. She just wanted the truth. When he came back, she finally asked, her voice trembling, "Daniel, who's Rachel?" He froze for a second. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but she saw it. His expression softened. "She's someone I used to know," he said carefully. "From before we met, used to—" Emma pressed. "Then why is she emailing you now?" Daniel sighed and sat beside her. "It's complicated," he said. "I didn't want to bring it up because it's tied to my past. Things I thought were buried." "What kind of things?" she whispered. He looked down at his hands. "Just family matters," he said quietly. "Painful ones." Something in his tone made her pause. It didn't sound like a lie, but it also didn't sound complete. She wanted to believe him, yet her heart still felt uneasy. "Then why didn't you just tell me?" she asked. "Why hide it?" Daniel's eyes met hers. "Because some stories hurt more when they're told," he said softly. "I didn't want to bring that pain into what we have." His words were gentle, sincere even, but they didn't answer the question. Emma nodded slowly, pretending to accept it. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over. She could see it in his eyes, a kind of sadness that had nothing to do with her, something buried deep inside him. That night, when Daniel fell asleep, Emma stayed awake again. The house was quiet except for the soft sound of rain tapping against the windows. She turned on her laptop and searched Daniel's old photos, hoping for some clue. There were pictures of them together, smiling, laughing, moments that now felt like they belonged to another life. Then she scrolled back further, to the time before she met him. That's when she found something strange. A photo of Daniel with another man, both smiling, arms around each other. The caption read, "Always my brother, no matter what." She'd never heard him mention a brother. Not once. Her breath caught. Why would he hide something as simple as family? She looked for more and found another picture. A woman standing beside them, her hand on the brother's shoulder. The woman's name, tagged in the photo, made her heart stop. Rachel. Emma sat back, her pulse racing. So Rachel wasn't just a friend. She was family, or had been. But why had Daniel never mentioned any of them? The next morning, Daniel woke up to find Emma sitting by the window, eyes red from crying. "Emma," he said gently, "what's wrong?" She turned to him, holding her laptop open to the photo. "Why didn't you tell me you had a brother?" she asked. For a moment, Daniel didn't speak. Then he sat down slowly, eyes fixed on the screen. His face changed, not angry, not surprised, but deeply sad. "Because he's gone," he said quietly. "And I didn't want you to see that part of me." Emma felt her chest tighten. "Gone? You mean he?" "Yes," Daniel whispered. "He passed away." He looked away, his voice breaking slightly. "It was years ago before I met you. It was sudden, and it broke everything in me. I didn't want to talk about it anymore." Rachel was his wife. She lost him too. Emma's tears blurred her vision. "Then why the messages? Why the secrecy?" Daniel shook his head. "There's more to it than I can explain right now. I promised him something before he died. I promised I'd protect the people he cared about, no matter what. Rachel just wanted me to be honest about it, but I couldn't. Not yet." His words were heavy with emotion. Emma wanted to be angry, but she couldn't. All she saw was the grief in his eyes, a grief he had been hiding for years. Still, a small part of her heart ached. "You should have trusted me," she said quietly. "I could have carried that with you." Daniel reached for her hand. "I know," he said softly, "and I'm sorry." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful like before. It was full of unspoken things, pain, regret, love, and confusion. Emma didn't know what to say or do. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to forgive him. But something told her the full truth hadn't surfaced yet. As Daniel stood and went to make coffee, Emma looked out the window. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray. She could feel it. This was only the beginning. Whatever Daniel was hiding went deeper than a promise. It wasn't about Rachel anymore. It was about something that had shaped who he was. And though she didn't know it yet, the truth she would uncover next wouldn't just break her heart. It would shatter the man she loved. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel's story still had missing pieces. Yes, he had told her about his brother, about how he had died, but something about his tone, his hesitation, made her believe there was more. The sadness in his eyes wasn't just grief. It was guilt. And the more she thought about it, the heavier that thought became. For the next few days, she watched him quietly. He went to work, came home, smiled when he saw her. Everything looked normal. But Emma could see the small signs he thought she didn't notice. The late-night phone calls, the way he'd step outside before answering them, the exhaustion that clung to his face afterward. It wasn't just stress. It was the weight of something unspoken. One rainy afternoon, Daniel said he had to visit an old friend outside the city. His voice was calm, but his eyes avoided hers. Emma nodded, pretending not to care, but the moment he left, her curiosity took control. She opened his drawer, not to invade him, but to understand what he couldn't say. Inside, under some old letters and sketches, she found a small box, plain wooden and locked with a tiny latch. Her heart pounded as she hesitated. Finally, she opened it. Inside were photographs, a few letters, and a hospital bracelet. The name on it made her freeze. Michael Carter, Daniel's brother. The date was from years ago, months after the accident Daniel had once mentioned. But according to him, Michael had died instantly. Emma's breath caught. The truth hit her slowly. Michael hadn't died right away. He had survived for months. And Daniel had never said a word. She kept looking through the box. There were letters addressed to Danny, written in shaky handwriting. They were from Michael. The words were simple but heavy. "Don't let her hate me. I'm sorry for what I did." The last letter read, "If you ever find peace again, promise me you'll tell the truth." Emma sat on the floor, holding the letters, tears welling up in her eyes. She could feel Daniel's pain in every word. The guilt he had carried, the silence he had chosen, it all made sense now. He hadn't lied to protect himself. He had lied to protect his brother's memory. That evening, when Daniel returned, he found her sitting by the window with the box beside her. He froze when he saw it. The color drained from his face. "Emma," he whispered, "where did you find that?" "In your drawer," she said quietly. "I needed to know." He stood there for a moment, not angry, just defeated. Then he sat down slowly, eyes fixed on the box. "I was going to tell you," he said. "I just didn't know how." "Tell me now," Emma said, her voice trembling. "Please." Daniel took a deep breath. "The accident wasn't what everyone thought," he began. "Michael survived. He was badly injured, but alive. For 6 months, I took care of him. No one knew, not even my parents. He didn't want anyone to use." "Ashamed." Emma frowned. "Ashamed of what?" Daniel looked at her, pain flickering in his eyes. The accident wasn't just bad luck. Michael was driving that night, and he wasn't alone. Someone else was with him. A man from his company. They'd been drinking. He lost control, and the car hit a wall. The other man didn't survive. Emma's heart tightened. So he blamed himself. Daniel nodded. He couldn't live with it. He was broken inside. He didn't want the world to know the truth. He didn't want his wife Rachel to live with the shame of what he'd done. So he made me promise to keep it a secret until the end. I watched him fade away, carrying that guilt every single day. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You carried it too," she said softly. He nodded again. "After he passed, I tried to move on. I met you, and for the first time I felt alive again. But Rachel Shea never stopped blaming herself for not saving him. I kept visiting her, helping her with the house, trying to fulfill my promise. That's why she emailed me. She wanted me to tell you before you found out on your own." Emma looked at him, her emotions tangled between pain and compassion. "You lied to protect everyone," she whispered, "but it hurt you the most." Daniel's voice broke. "I thought if I buried it deep enough, I could start over. But I couldn't. Every time I looked at you, I wanted to tell you. I wanted to tell you. And every time I stopped myself because I didn't want to see that look in your eyes, the one you have right now. Tears rolled down Emma's cheeks. She wanted to hold him, to tell him she understood. But part of her still felt the sting of betrayal. You should have trusted me, Daniel, she said softly. I would have stood by you. I know, he whispered. I was just afraid. I've lost enough already. The room fell silent except for the soft ticking of the clock. The truth had finally been spoken, but it didn't bring peace. Not yet. It just opened wounds they had both tried to hide. That night, they sat together without speaking. Daniel took her hand, his touch trembling. I never wanted to lie to you, he said. I just didn't know how to live with both the past and the future. Emma looked at him, the man she loved, the man who had carried a secret for years and saw both pain and strength. Then maybe it's time you stopped carrying it alone, she said. Daniel nodded, tears filling his eyes. You don't know how much I wanted to hear that. They sat like that for a long time, to people who had loved deeply and hurt quietly, holding on to each other in a silence that said everything. The truth had changed everything between them, but it had also brought them closer to something real. Later that night, when Emma lay awake beside him, she finally understood. Love wasn't about perfection or spotless truth. It was about facing the storms that come when secrets finally surface. Daniel had built walls to protect her from his pain, but in doing so, he had locked himself inside. Now, with everything out in the open, those walls were starting to fall. Emma closed her eyes, listening to his steady breathing beside her. She didn't know what the future would hold, whether love could survive what they had just uncovered. But she knew one thing. She didn't want to run from it. Not anymore. The secret that once broke him was now shared between them. And though it hurt, it also gave them a fragile kind of hope, the kind that comes only after truth finally finds the courage to speak. The days that followed were quiet. The truth had finally come out, but it didn't bring comfort, not right away. Emma and Daniel moved around each other carefully, speaking softly, avoiding the heavy subjects that still hung in the air. Their home, once full of laughter and calm, now felt fragile, like a place holding its breath. Daniel had stopped pretending. He no longer tried to act like everything was fine. He carried the look of a man who had laid down his armor but wasn't sure how to live without it. Sometimes Emma would find him staring out the window, lost in thoughts he couldn't share aloud. She didn't push him. She knew he was trying to forgive himself for things that had never truly been his fault. One evening, as the sky turned orange and gold, Emma found him sitting on the porch, an old letter in his hand. It was one of Michael's, the last one. His fingers trembled slightly as he unfolded it. He told me to tell the truth someday, Daniel said quietly. But he didn't say what would happen after I did. Emma sat beside him. Maybe he trusted you to find peace once you let it out, she said gently. Daniel looked at her, eyes tired but soft. Peace feels far away right now. Emma reached for his hand. That's because healing doesn't come right after honesty. It takes time. For a long moment, they just sat there, watching the sky fade. Then Daniel said something that made her heart ache. I thought keeping his secret made me strong, but all it did was break me slowly. It was the first time he admitted it, the damage the silence had done. In the days that followed, Daniel started opening up little by little. He told her how, after the accident, he had spent months living in guilt and isolation. How he had watched his brother fight to stay alive, watched him fade, and felt helpless. How Rachel had begged him to tell someone, but he couldn't bring himself to break Michael's last wish. It felt like carrying two lives. He confessed one night, his pain and mine. Every time I thought I was ready to move on, something pulled me back. Emma listened without judgment. For the first time, she understood the depth of his silence, not born from deceit, but from love and grief tangled together. But still, something in her had changed. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal overnight. She tried to forgive him, but she also needed to find herself again. So one morning she told him she wanted some space, a few days to think clearly. Daniel didn't argue. He just nodded, eyes full of understanding. Take the time you need, he said softly. I'll be here when you're ready. Emma spent a week by the coast at a small inn overlooking the sea. The waves were rough, the air cold, but the sound of the ocean helped her breathe again. She thought about everything, the love they built, the secrets that cracked it, and the truth that changed it. She realized that while pain had entered their lives, love had never truly left. On the seventh night, she got a message from Daniel. It wasn't long, just a photo of the old field painting where they first met. With a caption, "It still feels peaceful when I think of you." Tears filled her eyes. That was Daniel, quiet, emotional, always speaking in small, honest ways. She knew she couldn't stay away forever. She missed him. Not just the comfort of him, but the man who had faced his past and still wanted to build a future. When she returned home, Daniel was waiting at the door. He looked nervous, holding something behind his back. "You came back?" he said softly. "I told you I would," she replied. He smiled faintly, then handed her an envelope. "Before you say anything, just read this." Inside was a letter, but not from Daniel. It was from Michael, the same one she had seen earlier, but with a part Daniel hadn't shown her before. It read, "If Daniel ever finds love, tell her she's lucky. He carries the best and the worst of me, and I don't deserve him. Don't let my choices ruin his happiness. He deserves light, not my shadow." Emma's tears came before she could finish reading. She looked up at Daniel, who was already crying. "I wanted you to read that," he said quietly, "because I need you to know I'm done living in the past. I want to live for what's left." For us, Emma stepped forward and hugged him tightly. "Then stop trying to be perfect," she whispered. "Just be honest. That's all I ever needed." He held her like he never wanted to let go. For the first time in months, the silence between them felt gentle again, not full of secrets, but of understanding. In the weeks that followed, things slowly began to heal. Daniel started therapy to face his grief. Emma stood by him, not as someone fixing him, but as someone walking beside him. They rebuilt their connection one honest conversation at a time. Sometimes, in the quiet evenings, they'd visit Michael's grave together. Daniel would place fresh flowers, Emma would light a candle. They'd stand there in silence, not mourning, but remembering. It wasn't easy, but it was real. One afternoon, while sitting by the lake where they often walked, Daniel said, "I thought you'd hate me when you found out everything." Emma smiled softly. "I did feel hurt, but hate. No, you love too much. That's never something to hate." He took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You saved me. You know that." Emma shook her head. "No, Daniel. You saved yourself. You just needed someone to remind you that it was okay to let go." Hey, he did. Slowly, the weight of the past began to fade. The guilt didn't vanish completely, but it stopped controlling him. He learned to smile again, not the polite kind, but the real one, the kind Emma fell in love with. One evening, months later, they stood again at that same art gallery where it all began. The painting of the empty field still hung there, unchanged. Daniel looked at it and said, "It doesn't feel lonely anymore." Emma smiled. "Maybe that's because you're not." He turned to her, eyes soft with emotion. "I never was. Even when I didn't deserve it, you stayed." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder. That's what love does. It stays through the hard parts. And as they stood there, surrounded by quiet art and the soft hum of the city outside, both of them knew that what they had survived wasn't just heartbreak, it was transformation. Daniel's secret had once shattered him. But the truth, painful as it was, had also given him back his life. And for Emma, it reminded her that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about standing beside someone when they're finally brave enough to tell you who they really are. Their story wasn't flawless. It was human, full of mistakes, forgiveness, and hope. But sometimes that's what makes love last. Because in the end, it wasn't the secret that defined them. It was the way they chose to heal after it.